So today, as we go into the subject of sweeping your mind, right? The challenge is to sweep the old thoughts out of your mind. And sometimes you don't even know what those old thoughts are, because you think they're your truths. And they might have been given through your lineage, your parents, your families, your schools, or just life experiences. And when you sweep your mind on a daily basis, as we always promote, to get up before the sun comes up, which is quite wonderful. We just flew in from Berlin, and we were staying about 45 minutes out of East Berlin, right? And it was on a lake, and I found out there's 1,000 lakes in Berlin. And watching the sun come up, sitting there in meditation, I don't know anything better in the whole world than that. The brightness, it looked like everything across the lake was on fire because of that sun rising. And so one of the basic teachings, as most of you know, is to rise before the sun comes up. People come all over the world so troubled about their lives. They come and I listen and I talk. And one of the first things I'll say is, when do you get up in the morning? 8, 9, 10. I can't even get out of bed till 11. I'm so depressed. I said, that's it in the beginning. You have to get up. They say, I can't. Go to bed earlier. That's all Yogi Bhajan say. The only reason you can't get up is you don't go to bed till late. And even some people who are night owls, I'll say, stay up. And then go to bed after that. But let that sun meet you. Let that new energy of the new day meet you at your third eye point to wake you up, to sweep your mind. And then I went into their beautiful office and I found this wonderful little Ganesha in there that was gifted when they opened. And I thought, this is very, very cool. I'd never even seen one in India, how he just bobs along when he's walking. And then I decided I'll see how it works. Well, this is a perfect example. You brush, does everyone brush their teeth every morning? You can admit if you don't. You don't? Oh dear, we better talk about that. Because we don't want to go out. Doesn't feel very good, right? And the taste maybe isn't very pleasant, and we gag too. Do you know about gagging? No. Some of you don't. Do you use alum and salt here? It's a salt and an alum, potassium alum, and we mix it. And we put it on our toothbrush and we put it down our throat and we gag. And we gag the monkey glands. Without the monkey glands cleaned every day, what you do, you have a hot cup of tea or you have your first morning coffee, and all of the toxins that got stored or built in the monkey glands go down, poisoning your system again. So you'll hear, especially in India, you'll hear before the sun comes up, especially if you're in a complex like an ashram, you'll hear all the Indians, you hear gagging, all the rooms. We have an apartment there, a beautiful place, but it's an open courtyard to the people below, and it's kind of echoey. So in the morning you'll hear, big gagging, serious gagging, and it sounds like men are really gagging. But you'll feel better, and then you scrape your tongue, and then you brush your teeth and carry on. So without doing that, we wouldn't feel like we'd started our day right. It just doesn't feel right. But that's the same way with your mind. We need to, if you want to stay sane, if you want not to be depressed, if you want to be creative, if you want to love the life, is to do that which will clean your mind as well as your teeth every morning. So when I was playing with this little fellow, I noticed that this is somebody who doesn't clean their mind every morning. They lose their mind. They lose their head. Getting up every morning, and thanking the Creator, and during meditations and yoga, whatever your practice is, and it can be everything from Judaism to Catholicism to our Aquarian sadhana, or to whatever works for you, but to rise before the sun comes up, and then you get going and you're able to walk forward in life. So cool. Now when you're young, you may not think this is a truth, but if any of you have parents or grandparents or friends or aunties or uncles who are suffering from things such as Alzheimer's or dementia, who can't remember anything and then can't even remember you, and you can't leave them home anymore because you're afraid they won't turn the pot off on the stove and they'll build a fire in the house and all kinds of things, and then you send them to a housing situation where they can be watched all the time. And that is happening more and more. I'm not saying here, but certainly, could you get them on straight so we can have them with us tonight? Throughout the world. We're finding this is happening more and more because we're living longer. The average age in America used to be, I think something like, when I was young, it was like 62 and 63 years old was the average death time. And then it rose to 70s, and now I believe it's in the 80s. And people are doing full-time work. We have one of our employees in New York at Golden Bridge, her grandfather is a physicist, and he goes to work every day, and he's 94. So it happens more and more now that we're getting second or third careers, we're taking on new projects, we're doing all kinds of things. But there's no way if you don't keep the mind crisp. And I bet if we were to go to all these old people that live the longest, and actually there was a study done with John Robbins, he wrote Healthy at 100, that it was Ecuador, it was the Hunzas in Pakistan, and it was the country of Georgia that used to be Russia. That those are the three countries that the people lived healthy and the longest. An average age wasn't unusual to be 115 years old. But not living in a hospital, not knowing anything, but being very bright and very alive. And they went to test their hearts and the different systems in their body. And he said it was very funny because all the old men would wait in line to be tested, and they'd all be laughing and joking with each other and going like that and just carrying on. And when they researched what they did, they didn't overeat. They got up before the sun came up, and they jumped into cold bodies of water. They worked hard, they played hard, they danced, and they sang. Such a beautiful life. They also lived in high altitudes, which probably helped them to keep their lung and their heart capacity strong. And then I think what many of Western people do, and they don't adhere to any of that. And I think you have a freedom for X amount of years, like a young man, to maybe go clubbing, stay out late. We've all done kinds of things, all kinds of things, right? In our younger years, maybe. And through grace, we were able to find another lifestyle that was more suitable for the next chapter in our lives. So if tonight we can have an experience of this body, of this precious, precious body, and this precious, precious mind, and make an agreement with yourself to keep this mind and this body whole, complete, until you take your last breath. Why not? If you make that agreement now, then it shall come to pass, and then you'll live accordingly, of course, always by Creator's grace, accordingly to move in that direction, rather than to move in a random direction. Like, well, you know, my mother got cancer, or heart diseases in our family, or nobody in our family survives without getting dementia or losing their mind, and then you just kind of fall into some normal way of thinking, where actually if you set and then follow, like if you're going to make a chocolate cake, say, But you never made a chocolate cake before. You're not even a baker. And you decide to make a chocolate cake, but you don't really have any idea of the ingredients. So you go in the kitchen and you just start dumping all this stuff in. Like random, like maybe there's some flour, and I know there must be chocolate because it's chocolate cake. It must raise, but I'm not sure with what. And pretty soon it's not going to turn out. It's going to be terrible. Nobody's going to want to eat it. It's just going to be like a mess. But that's how our lives can be. Unless you find a recipe of which to live. And sometimes it takes experimental. Sometimes you have to try one chocolate recipe and then the other until you perfect that chocolate cake. But to live randomly is like, it can work for so many years, usually till you're 28 years old. And then you start that Saturn return, 28 to 32. And then you start looking at your life and knowing that there has to be, that freedom comes from order. And when I was young, I thought freedom came from random living. I called random just spontaneous, whatever, never to know what I was going to do every day, never to know anything, but I wanted the freedom to live spontaneously because I had grown up in quite a formed type tradition. And so when I ran that gamut for a long time, just freedom was random living. Freedom was just doing whatever and whenever and with whomever you wanted to do anything with, because to me, that was life. But as life played a lot of lessons on me as years went by, I realized that there had to be something more than just random living, and that random living wasn't really the life of freedom or liberation. And that's, of course, when I started my spiritual journey when I was 27, and through Guru's grace. So I think chapters are part of our lives. Searching is part of our lives. But if you're still searching when you're 75 years old, it's like you gotta find it before then. Whatever it is, and however you are brought to a certain teaching or a certain way, whether it's this way or another way, it has to have a form to be free. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So if tonight we can clear our minds, and when you clear the intellect, you come into your true intelligence, which is this part of your brain, the neocortex. When you come to know that part and experience the part and be able to call upon that part for information, then the base of the skull, which is really the reptilian part that wants to run away all the time or fight or argue or always be right or always make life so hard and tough, you're able to lift out because the fear is leaving. Then you have that mammalian brain, which is the ordinary brain. You know, you need your things to live. You need to work, you need to have food, and do all of that. And that's good, and that needs to be stabilized, but there's way more than that going on about why you reincarnated back. And as yogis, there's so much more. And it's the mystical part. It's the sixth sense. It's the connection with the divine, whatever you want to call it. It's the insights, it's the dreams, it's the knowingness, it's the creativity that gives you the information of why you reincarnated back and what you're supposed to do this lifetime. But until you secure the reptilian up to the mammalian, you can't really go into the neocortex. And that's really developed the first year of your life on planet Earth. But most of our parents or caretakers didn't know that. So they just treated you like a little baby, a cutie-wootie who didn't know anything. And you were seeking that opening of that sixth sense. And so then we grow up, we go through many hardships and pains and lostness, many of us, and then we find perhaps this room. And it gives a transformation, and it's a demarcation that you're ready to enter that next consciousness, which is your awareness. And it's all through grace. It's what you've earned in so many lifetimes that you get to even be sitting here today. It's just grace. because most people aren't sitting in a yoga class right now in the world.